first I shoot this guy, and then I shoot that guy, and then come around this corner, and I'm like, oh freeze! So as I'm sure you guys have already figured out, this is the mashup, but I'm sure you're asking, what the hell is the mashup? Well, basically what it is it's going to be a compilation of this, just me talking to you guys right now. There's going to be some gameplay, there's going to be pictures, there's going to be text. There's basically going to be whatever I need to help describe when I want to talk to you guys. And hopefully this will help mix things up and make my commentaries a little more interesting when I decide to do it this way. Yeah, I have no idea if this is going to work out, but I do hope you guys enjoy. Now, you guys might be asking yourselves, why are we doing the mashup? What is the reason behind it? Well, there's no secret. I'm a beast, so when I get on here and I start spilling new blood and just poning fools, sometimes it's tough for you guys to pay attention to what I'm really talking about because you're just awestruck by what you're seeing on the screen. So here I've devised a new way where I can also show you some great gameplay, but at the same time keep all of us on task and hopefully keep it entertaining for you guys. If you haven't picked up on the sarcasm about my gameplay yet, you don't know me very well. But anyways, here we go. So today's topic is pretty simple. It's about how we play games and how that affects our overall experience. This is a topic I've actually wanted to talk about for a long time. How one plays a game is pretty much easily determined by the choices that one will make when playing a game. And when it comes to making choices, there are three very distinct routes that people will use when playing a game. With the first route, the completionist route, players will simply choose every choice available to make sure they experience everything that is within the game. On our second route, the statistical route, players will make choices purely based on statistics. Whatever will prove to make their character the strongest or make them liked by the certain faction is the choice that they will make. The third route is the personal route, in which players make choices based on their own emotions and morals. Now, before we get into this, I want to make it perfectly clear that all of these choices are fine. There's no right choice, there's no wrong choice. Every single one of these choices is acceptable, and you should play however you want. But that being said, the first two routes that I explained, the completionist route and the statistical route, if you decide to strictly stay to those and kind of ignore the personal route when playing games, you do run the risk of diluting your experience and kind of taking away from the overall experience that will be presented in a game. And what I mean by this is basically those two routes, when it comes to them and when it comes to your decision making, is you've already figured out how you're going to answer the question. When it comes to the completionist route, you're going to choose one path one time, and then you immediately know that you're going to go back and choose the second path afterwards. So it's not that difficult for you to make the choice. And when the statistical route, you know that you're going to pick every choice that will benefit your character the most. So basically what ends up happening is you get to a point where you're not thinking about the question being asked, and oftentimes developers give us questions to ask a larger question. A perfect example of how a choice could result in an actual larger question being asked is the little sisters that are found in BioShock. Now, if you were to take the completionist route, you would simply decide to save the little sisters one time and then harvest them the next to see what happens. And if you were going to take a statistical route, you would probably weigh your options of, is it more important to get more Adam in the immediate time, or is it worth it to go without a little bit of Adam and get more in the long term? However, if you were to look at this from a personal route and try to think about what the developers are actually asking, you may think that this question actually has to do with redemption, and is redemption possible? These little sisters have done terrible things, but at their core they're still innocent little girls. And are we able to save them in the end, and are they worth redeeming in the end, is the question that's being asked. Now that you can see the importance of just looking beyond the immediate choice and looking at maybe the overall question that's being asked, a larger question remains, why is it that we're so often blinded of this fact? Why can't we actually look at the real questions that are being asked? Well, there are a number of things. Developers actually dilute their own questions by what they implement in the game with things like gamer scores and differing paradigm bars, and we ourselves also kind of draw ourselves away from the game with our own personal biases that we bring into the game before we even begin to play. First, let's take a look at our own personal biases and how that affects how we play games. We all have our own personal histories, and unfortunately we can't leave that at the door even when we go to play games. Sometimes it travels into the game and it kind of affects how we go about playing it. I myself, when I was younger, was extremely competitive. Winning was everything to me, and it was almost to an insane extent. I actually remember one particular instance in which I was playing Trouble, the board game, and unfortunately I lost. I instantly went into a rampage, throwing my mattress over and vowing to never play the game again. Ironically, that day it was Trouble that got me into trouble. Knowing that embarrassing story about me, it probably comes as no surprise that winning became a must for me in video games as well. I remember using things like Code Genie and Game Shark. Those became my best friends because I wanted to make sure that I manipulated the game as much as possible to make sure that I win and that I was as best and strongest as possible. And that kind of later translated as I grow up into me, manipulating the game to make every choice to make sure that it benefited my character and that I was the strongest that I possibly could be. And looking back on this and kind of where I am now, I can kind of see that I have no memorable gaming experiences. I mean, I have games that I loved for the gameplay, and I have games, that will always be nostalgic in my heart. But looking back to that phase of when I would play games, there's no story and there's no pivotal moment playing a story that captivates me, and that's because I was blind to it. Because the only thing I cared about was making my character as strong as I possibly could. We are not purely to blame for our inability to see these larger questions being asked by developers. In fact, the developers themselves are partly to blame for the problem. They institute a lot of things in their games that actually draw us away from the larger questions that they're asking. For example, with Gamerscore, players are often driven to be completionists because the only way to achieve the maximum score is usually to choose all choices. Therefore, who cares about making any decision because you're just going to go back and choose the other one anyways so you can get the highest Gamerscore that you possibly can. And instituting things like good and evil in games when making choices dilutes the choices altogether because players usually manipulate the choice so that it can either be good or evil. A perfect example of this is Mass Effect 2. I'm sorry guys to interrupt the flow of the whole commentary, but I don't know if you guys noticed, but as soon as I got like my chopper gunner and dogs, everyone left the lobby. There were like 4 kids left in there, and there was this one kid, and he just kept camping and camping and camping. And I was okay with that. I was like, oh, he's getting beat pretty bad. He's gonna camp, whatever. But I knew he was in that building, I knew he was in that room, but I thought he at least would have had the decency to look out the window. But nope, he's just sitting in the corner waiting for me, and I was just like, in which the developers created the Paragon, which was technically the good, pious character, and the Renegade, which was pretty much the badass. And basically, you had to make sure that you chose all the choices in that one tree so you can continue to build up either your Renegade or Paragon level to open more options and benefit you later in the game. By instituting things like this, it ultimately dilutes their choices because we're no longer going to think in terms of how we personally feel about the question. We're going to think, what can we do to make sure that we become as much of a Paragon or Renegade as we want? So basically what's going on here is there's just too much in the way. There's too much going on in these games for us really to be able to put all that aside and kind of look at these deeper questions that are being asked. And like I had said earlier, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I love Gamerscore. It's really fun, and it's a fun way for you to compete with your friends. And I do really like the addition of the Renegade and Paragon system in Mass Effect 2. I just think that if developers are really going to put in these deep underlying questions, they have to figure out a better way about posing them to us, because it's kind of ridiculous to expect us to put all that aside and then go, well, the game's really telling me to act this way, but I should think about how I personally feel about this. It's really difficult to do that, and if you don't want to do that at all, that's completely fine too. There's no right or wrong way to play games. I said that, and I'll continue to say that. But it's important to take that introspective look and kind of maybe you can get a little more out of it. And I just thought I would let you guys know, for those of you who didn't, that there's a little more depth that you sometimes realize when it comes to these games. Anyways, that's going to do it for me this week, guys. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, please comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps me out, and it drives me to keep spending the time that it takes to make videos like these.